How dare you try to enter UA? Katsuki demanded, his voice full of hatred and malice. Izuku opened his eyes and looked at Katsuki, but did not respond. You, a useless, quirkless, powerless weakling. Do you think you are on my level? Katsuki activated his quirk, causing an explosion next to Izuku. Izuku cringed, holding his air. Then, yes, a quirkless does think he's on your level, he whispered, a soft smile, slightly filled with determination, forming on his freckled face. Katsuki took another step forward, his face filling with hatred. Izuku looked him straight in the eye, feeling as if he were being stared at by monsters, and he could swear that Katsuki was starting to smoke from his ears. But he remained silent, saying nothing, simply staring directly into those fiery red eyes. Katsuki clenched his teeth, his ego stabbed, hurt, wounded by a nobody. Then he raised his fist, his knuckles turning white from the force he was exerting. However, before he could even touch a hair on his head, the teacher cleared his throat. Okay, everyone back to your seats. Katsuki stopped dead in his tracks, lowering his fist and rolling his eyes. Yes, I'm coming. And with one last look of pure hatred at Izuku, he returned to his seat. You too, Midoriya, return to your seat, the teacher said to Izuku. Izuku nodded, standing up gently and dusting of his uniform. He walked back to his seat, feeling eyes on him, everyone whispering. There, he picked up the remains of his pencil and his notebook. Then Izuku sat down without making a sound, turning his attention back to class. Okay, open your books to page 243, the teacher announced, walking to the front of the classroom again and beginning to talk about the lesson. Typical. Meanwhile, Izuku, sitting at the back of the classroom, felt heavier, sharper eyes watching him from above. Feeling more observed than ever, he looked up and saw Katsuki staring at him with those ruby eyes full of rage and anger. Izuku raised his head then, smiling. Katsuki clicked his tongue and turned to his book. Izuku shrugged, picking up his bag and putting away his notebook and pencil stubs. When class ended, Izuku decided to stay a little longer to continue taking notes from Mirko in peace, this time with his cell phone. This was like saying, he hadn't counted exactly, maybe the 10th video of the day. He didn't care, he was happy. Back in his shrimp-like posture, he smiled, his pencil moving frantically. Hey Deku, someone interrupted him. Izuku rolled his eyes, slowly turning toward the source of the voice. There was Katsuki again with his lacquers along fingers, and the other one whose quirk he couldn't even remember. He sighed. It was going to be one of those days again where Katsuki got angry. At first, it was hard. They were kids, and Izuku didn't have the mental capacity to understand what was going on. You could say that at first it caused him a little trauma, making him cringe every time someone spoke to him. That was a long time ago. He didn't let it get to him. Mirko was his support, as was his mother. However, Katsuki. He continued with his business. Izuku raised his head, turning off his cell phone and putting his pencil aside. Katsuki looked him straight in the eye with a lot of resentment. Izuku raised an eyebrow, but couldn't say anything because in a matter of seconds, Katsuki and his lackeys were on top of him. Katsuki grabbed his notebook, holding it as if it were nothing more than trash. Izuku quickly looked at him, his face contorting in anger. Give that back. He got up from his chair, trying unsuccessfully to grab his notebook. Katsuki had lifted the notebook into the air, putting it out of Izuku's reach. Izuku looked at him with hatred. Katsuki laughed along with his lackeys. Got a problem, Deku? Oh, if only he knew he had a problem, and a serious one at that. Yes, there's a damn problem, Kaken. Katsuki raised an eyebrow at this statement. It had been so long since Izuku had spoken to him so clearly. Even with all the bullying he did, he couldn't get more than a word or two out of him, and even those were barely audible. Oh, what problem? Katsuki asked defiantly. Izuku, however, did not answer him, simply standing still, as if calculating Katsuki. Hey, Bakugo, isn't that the notebook where you take notes on heroes? A lackey asked, breaking the silence. Katsuki lowered his gaze to the notebook, opening it and flipping through the pages. As he did so, his eyebrows slowly rose, his teeth clenching. Yes, about heroes. And when he finished looking at it, he slammed it shut. His gaze fell on Izuku, looking disgusted. Damn Deku, you're a stalker. The lackeys beside him laughed. Katsuki began to squeeze his hand on the notebook. That's when Izuku jumped up, grabbing his notebook again and tearing out some pages. Katsuki, alerted by the sudden jump, took a few steps back, his lackey's eyes widening.
What the hell, Deku?
Katsuki growled, watching Izuku hug his notebook. Izuku stared at him, his gaze full of hatred.
On the other hand, one of the footmen had noticed one of the pages that had fallen. What is this? He wondered, moving away from the group and approaching to pick up the page. A smile crossed his face once he picked up the page. It seems that the quirkless is in love, or he's a stalker.
Everyone turned to look at the footman once he said this. Katsuki raised an eyebrow, his face turning in disgust.
It looks more like a stalker, he said coldly, turning to Izuku.
Izuku turned to him as well, looking him in the eyes, his brow furrowed more than ever.
You're disgusting, Deku. You're not even worth wasting time on anymore, he declared, his voice full of venom, disgust, and revulsion. Izuku didn't respond. His hands clenched around his diary. Let's go, idiots. Let's leave this useless stalker here. And he walked away with his lackeys, who also looked at Izuku with disgust.
His feet stepped on the pages scattered on the ground.